Okay, my name is Reinhold Spadzinski. I was born into a family of 6 siblings, and I'm the middle child. I had 3 sisters and 2 brothers. I grew up in a time that was very, very difficult. I remember when the war started in 1939, I was at that time 5 years old. And so my uncles were drafted into the army, and then when they came back on visitation, holidays or whatever it was, they would tell us what was happening, and for me this was horrible. And then later on, when I was older already, I saw when there was a big commotion and there were a lot of noise, and I looked up in the sky, and there were airplanes flying in direction of Warsaw. And about half an hour later, I could hear this noise, this terrible noise. As a matter of fact, it even shook the ground, because it was only 60 miles away from there. And so, they were bombing Warsaw, the capital city of Poland. And I counted actually the airplanes. There were 243 airplanes that flew in the daytime. And this was quite scary. And then I asked Dad what was going on, and he was saying, you know what, right now the British are bombing Warsaw because Warsaw has been taken over by the German soldiers, and they want to get rid of the German soldiers out of Warsaw. And so that was in 1943. And in 1944, you could hear more often the bombings going on. But then they were not coming in during the daytime. They only came during the night. And many nights I was scared. I would go into my dad's and mom's bedroom, and I would sleep with them because I was so scared because of hearing the war coming closer and closer to us. So in 1940, they checked out every nationality. If you were 6 generations Aryan, then you were a real German citizen. And some of them, because in our case, our name had changed way, way back when we first came to West Prussia, because we lived among these Polish people. So then Hitler said, well, that doesn't sit well, that our German citizens have Polish names. So one day they came and said, from now on, your name is Spachman. So all of a sudden we got citizen paper in no more Spadzinski, but Spachman. And so we were Spachman from 1940 till 1945, till we fled. Okay? But then when we fled, we had to destroy all our German papers, all our German pictures, so that if they would have caught us somewhere, that they wouldn't know that we are German. When Hitler, or when the Nazis took over our part of West Prussia, a lot of things were changed. Number one, there was a greater division between German people and Polish people. And then the party, the Nazi party, started to have more and more influence on all the people, on the family life. Number one, most of the young people were drafted into the army. And then, number two, food was being rationed. So you just couldn't get everything you wanted. For everything you had to have ration cards. Plus, it became so that nobody trusted each other. If you were in a party, you were supposed to snitch on the people what they were doing. So you were never sure who your enemy was, who your friend was. all of a sudden the loyalties changed. And so it was very, very difficult. One day, these two policemen or soldiers came with guns, and they had bayonets on the end of their guns, and they came and said to my mom and dad, Mr. Spadzinski, we have to take you with us. You have 20 minutes to get ready. So quickly my mom gave him warm clothing and warm boots, and then she says, just 1 minute. And then she prayed with my dad and said, look, Lord, you know where he's going. You take care of him, and please bring him home safely. And for me, this was such a shock. And I hated these men because they had taken my dad. Can you imagine my dad that I loved so dearly because he did everything that he could to keep me safe and healthy and well? Well, that hate I carried for, I would say, at least 7 or 8 years. When my father came back, he told us that he was taken from our home into our township prison and put into the inner security so that nobody could get at him. And he was kept safe while the other prisoners were beaten. Most of them were Germans. They were beaten. They cried like animals. But my father never was touched. It was God's protection. And so he was for 8 months gone. We never heard of him at all. But he was taken to the Ukraine, to the city of Kharkov, and there he was for 8 months. That prison held, or that camp held 2,500 men. And when my father was released, there were only 250 left alive. All the others died in that prison because of diseases that came in. Most of them died because of internal disease, like bleeding ulcers and all this kind of stuff. In 1946, when my father came back from Russia, from the Ukraine, my dad said, we got to get out from here. And so they planned our flight. And since my dad had good friends in the government, we were able to acquire some papers that we had. All they did is change our first names because we all had German first names. So now they changed our names that sounded too German and gave us names that could have sounded Polish too. Like, for instance, my father's name was Adolf. They changed it to Adam. My name was Reinhold, and they changed it to Henry. And so all of our names were changed so that they would sound like Polish people would sound. And so we had Jewish friends, and they were not taken to concentration camp. They were only in work camps in Germany. And one of them came back with a truck. And because we had hidden Jewish people during Hitler's time, these people were so thankful, and they came back and said, listen, we lived through the war and we are alive and well, and they thanked us for keeping them safe and for prayer. And so this guy came back and he says, whatever you want, I will do it if it's in my power. So he had a truck, and when we fled, he drove us with his truck to a faraway train station. So when we fled, they never would have thought that we would have gone that far on a train station, because there were 3 train stations close by. There was a very, very terrible thing happened. My oldest sister was supposed to get my aunt and 2 cousins, so they would come with us on that truck that took us away from where we lived to that train station. And during that day, it snowed, slush. And so she couldn't drive her bike. She had to push it. And she arrived, she saw the truck leaving. And she screamed and yelled, but of course they didn't hear it. Good thing was that mayor who gave us the papers, he was there looking, making sure that we got off to a good start. When he heard the screams, he said, "Hey, listen, come here." And he hid her in his place there on the third floor or something. And he says, "Okay, I'll get you to your parents." She was actually kept on top of a store. And everybody came in the store, "Did you hear the news? The Spadzinski clan, they all disappeared during the night." And they checked every train station and they can't find them. Boy, if they find him, they're gonna hang him. And of course, and then 3 days later, he gave her a ticket to go to where he thought we were. Now, there's two cities in Poland. They sound very similar. One is called Szczecin, which is a big city, well, at that time over 500,000 people, and Szczecinek, that had maybe 50,000 people, or maybe less. So he gave her a train ticket to Szczecinek, and when she arrived there, she couldn't find us. And so she went back to the train station and she sat and she was weeping. And there were 3 soldiers came in, one officer with 2 soldiers, and he looked around and he went to her, "Hey, listen, miss, why are you crying?" So my sister told him why she was crying. So the officer says, "I think I know what this situation is. Your parents went to this big city instead of this city." So he said, but my sister says, "I have no money for a ticket. Don't worry." They bought a ticket and they took her to the big city, Szczecin. And in the meantime, my mom and dad were actually fasting and praying that God would keep her safe and that we would get back together. And we had received, when we were fleeing, the mayor of the town gave us papers that we could go to every Red Cross and get meals. And so as they are walking towards the Red Cross station, all of a sudden, my sister ran across the street. She saw them run across the street and fell around the necks. And then she turned around and wanted to introduce the soldiers, and they were gone.